I'm Robert Reilly. I'll serve as your Master of Ceremonies this afternoon. As is said before every performance at the Washington National Opera, please turn off your cell phones. Well, this is an event to discuss the concepts and themes of Joe Sobran's book, Hustler, The Clinton Legacy. In order to do this, it's important to know who the author was. I'm particularly delighted to serve in this capacity this afternoon because Joe Sobran was a dear friend of mine. Also, Bill Clinton was a classmate of mine, and he wasn't. I also had the privilege to work in the White House under President Ronald Reagan. So the place had a sort of sanctity for me. And I do remember when one of our Georgetown class reunions was held in the White House before its resident had so defiled it. I wanted an announcement made for the alumni event. There was going to be a polo game on the Mall. And so I told our former class president, can you have that announcement made? And he came back and said the Clintons don't want to have that announcement made because it's too elitist. At that very moment, the band was playing Hot Nuts. And I thought, this is interesting. They won't announce the polo game, but they allowed. And as we subsequently learned, the Oval Room was defiled in a certain way. And the thought that this man may be back in some proximity to that room leaves me in a state of shock. I'm sorry that's off script, Fran, but yes, from the heart. Now, Joe was a keen observer of human nature. He had an insightful mind, something that's vividly apparent from his 40 years as a columnist. While today we are looking at his writings on the Clinton presidency, this is but a small part of his work. As you would know if you have read other compilations of Joe's writing, which Fran Griffin has published. Joe was unique in that he was an English major in college, but unlike anyone you could find today. Not only did Joe read all the great works, but he memorized many of them, including all of Shakespeare. That is, the plays and the sonnets. And I was present on a number of occasions in which people would throw him lines from a play or a sonnet, and Joe would finish the lines and continue on for however long as you wished him to recite from that play or the sonnet. One of the great mnemonic feats I have witnessed in my life was, and of course this was not an idiot savant gift for memorization. It was Joe's love of Shakespeare that impelled him to do this and to know these works so well. Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. And of course, that's Joe, ancient, medieval, classical literature. He was well versed in those as well, as was apparent from his writing. So with Bill and Hillary as subjects, Joe used his insightful skills, elegant writing, and humor to treat the subjects. The result is Hustler, The Clinton Legacy, unlike any other book on this sorry subject. A couple of quick samples from the book. Joe writes, quote, Americans have been taught to expect their presidents to be great men of substance, courage, eloquence, and dignity. You can tell he was writing some time ago. Clinton has none of these qualities and hardly pretends to have them. He has no smack of the hero or man of destiny. On the contrary, he is nothing but a skilled political specialist, a charmingly unscrupulous improviser possessing all the currently necessary arts of raising money. He's still very deft at that, wooing important power blocks and getting elected, unquote. Another passage. What's surprising is the man's perverse consistency in the arts of public seduction. You'd think a politician mocked as Slick Willie and pander bear would go out of his way to improve on his reputation and build confidence in his word. Instead, Mr. Clinton seems bent on vindicating his detractors from Paul Tsongas to Jennifer Flowers to Dan Quayle. But throughout his essays in Hustler, Joe retained his sense of humor, such as in 1998 he wrote, "Tragically, our nation has now, for the second time in a few years, seen a president afflicted with Alzheimer's. Bill Clinton's fabled memory has broken down. During his August 17 grand jury testimony, it failed him dozens of times. It's a shame because he really needs his memory now. He's been the victim of so many lying and designing women, Jennifer Flowers, Paula Jones, Kathleen Reilly, Linda Tripp, and Monica Lewinsky. He has disputed their accounts of his behavior with as much vigor as a memory-impaired person can, but it's tough. On the other hand, one advantage of having Alzheimer's is that you keep meeting new women." Unquote. Well, I wanted to give that short introduction of the author and some flavor of his writing. To begin our conference, I'd like to introduce Ms. Fran Griffin, who's responsible for the republication of Hustler, The Clinton Legacy. Fran is an editor, publisher, organizer, and president of the Fitzgerald Griffin Foundation, which published Hustler and other anthologies of Joe's work. Please welcome Fran Griffin.
Thank you so much, Bob, and for taking on this task of being our MC. 16 years ago, on October 3rd, 2000, I stood with author Joseph Sobran when we released the first edition of Hustler, The Clinton Legacy. And today, I'm standing here without Joe, but with a fantastic legacy of his work. And also to announce that we have the second edition of Hustler now ready. So, and FGF Books, which is the publishing imprint of the Fitzgerald Griffin Foundation, decided to reprint Hustler because it's even more relevant and more timely now than it was in the year 2000. At that time, in 2000, we had endured 8 years of Bill and Hillary. We had lived through all the scandals and all the outrages of the presidency. And while Sobran's treatment of the Clinton shenanigans, written during those years, was outstanding, many people already thought they knew everything about Clinton, and it was in the news all the time. So we didn't get much coverage on that first book. But the reason I wanted to republish it is memories are short. And the other thing that astounds me is this pair, Hillary and Bill, have overcome what I thought was insurmountable, regaining their reputation to the point that Hillary and Bill could possibly be in the White House again. Even though Bill was humiliated, he lost his law license, he paid tens of thousands of dollars to some of his victims, he's been remade and rehabilitated. It's totally amazing to me. So that's why with the short memories, we want to get people who really don't know much about the Clintons to read some of this work. So I wanted to, I was trying to figure out what I should tell you today, and I found the press conference statement that Mr. Sobran made 16 years ago, and I want to read some of that to you because it does sum up a lot of what he said. And we were at a press conference at the Rayburn House Office building. So Sobran says, "It's time to assess the Clinton legacy. It has been taking shape for 8 years, and no 11th hour miracles can change it now. That legacy is one of spectacular scandal, untrammeled executive power, and stunning moral corrosion. We should bear in mind that the first move to impeach Bill Clinton was made by Congressman Bob Barr of Georgia, long before Clinton lied, perjured himself, and obstructed justice in his most famous scandal. Back when the general public had never heard of Monica Lewinsky, serious defenders of the Constitution realized that Clinton's abuses of power warranted his removal from office. In fact, the Lewinsky scandal was a distraction from far graver matters. Impeachment is often spoken of as a constitutional crisis," Sobran said. "It was never meant to be that. It is a constitutional procedure. The framers of the Constitution provided for it as a peaceful way of removing public officials who had abused power or failed to counteract abuses of power by their subordinates. It was meant not as a last resort, but as a constant threat to those who were tempted to betray the public trust. In fact, what Joe doesn't say in here, he often called for impeachment of some Supreme Court justices. He said, we need to use this impeachment that's given to us. In the Federalist Papers, Alexander Hamilton explained at length that a crucial difference between our constitutional republic and a monarchy would be that a president who abused power could be removed lawfully without the necessity of violent revolution. Through impeachment and conviction, the people's representatives would be merely discharging their employee, not creating a crisis of the sort that had rocked England when the kings were deposed. Impeachment should probably be used more often than it has been. And if ever a president made a habit of abusing his office by ignoring constitutional limitations of executive power, it was Bill Clinton. Of course, this was written, in the year 2000. So Clinton's presidency has raised some of the most serious issues in the history of the republic, but has also raised, in all fairness, some of the silliness. My book tries to address both the gravity and absurdity of the Clinton years. When Monica Lewinsky said she didn't want to be remembered in history only for her affair with Clinton, one way quipped that in that case, she better start working on a cure for cancer. My own view was that even if she found a cure for cancer, it would only make this difference. Future encyclopedia articles about her would end with the sentence, "She also found a cure for cancer." Clinton's lies during the impeachment battle were rich in comedy. If anything could be more remorsefully cynical, his mediocrity, it was contrition. His confession had been forced out of him by the knowledge that the FBI lab was about to expose him anyway, and he admitted the bare minimum necessity to defend the time bomb. What a riotous character study. As Paul Greenberg noted, Clinton seemed like the result of a collaboration between Mark Twain and William Faulkner. So, at the same time, Clinton is a grave sign of our times, of our national amnesia about moral and political traditions. Only a country that has lost its memory and its capacity for heroic aspiration could have chosen and endured such a man as its leader. In the end, the Clinton presidency was saved because of the erosion of moral standards he himself had done so much to promote. It is fitting that one of his chief defenders should be Larry Flynt. And what does this presidency say about us? And Joe says, as I write in my book, watching the liberties he takes with his office, a patriotic American begins to understand how patriotic Romans must have felt when the Emperor Caligula appointed his horse consul. It is not that he is the worst of men. It is that this has become the kind of country where a man of his make can rise to the top. And haven't we seen that since this was written? Santa Anna's overused line has it that those who cannot remember the past are doomed to repeat it. In this case, we may repeat the recent past immediately, because if Al Gore succeeds Bill Clinton, the Clinton legacy will be carried on without pause. As I want to add here, of course, we can change those words to Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton instead. So memories are short, which is why Bill and Hill have overcome the insurmountable, as I said. But I also wanted to read you some excerpts, which are, if you have the flyer, which I put a lot of flyers on here, you can kind of follow along with these excerpts. These are from the book. And I think they're quite good. So I'm going to read a couple of my favorites. Clinton admits he lied to us once, but he reminds us that he's told the truth hundreds upon hundreds of times. He seems to think that if you lie less than half the time, you are in balance an honest man. And even though he has had a few flings, he has been a faithful husband hundreds upon hundreds of times. So, and then he says, Hillary Clinton has already turned out to be the sort of devious and self-serving operator she used to denounce. Another one, Clinton's both advocate and exemplar of the sexual revolution. He has used the presidency to promote everything from gay rights to late-term abortion. His ideology is a fusion of Hugh Hefner and Gloria Steinem. So then it appears that the Clinton marriage has been good and dead for a long time, and that the price of Hillary's cooperation in Bill's quest for the presidency was a share of the spoils. And isn't that true now with her getting the nomination? In other words, the White House has become the object of a de facto property settlement in a bitter but unannounced divorce between two extremely ambitious people. And we've seen that more and more as time goes on. And the last one on the far right in the bottom, one of my favorites ones, says, Clinton may be a sign that the new morality is aging badly. The idea that a man should be judged by his own principles sounds fine until you meet the man who doesn't have any. So, one more excerpt that's not on there, which I really like, it's in the book. Despite all we hear about gay pride, nobody wishes the condition on those they love. It's bizarre to imagine even the most liberal expectant parents hoping their child will be a homosexual. People never say, Susan and I don't care whether it's a boy or girl, as long as it's gay or lesbian. So, so I wanted to share some of these vintage Sobran quotes. And a few weeks ago, I saw Ann Coulter, who was repeatedly called Joe the greatest writer in the world. She wrote the foreword to this book. Ann tells me that Joe was very instrumental in her getting her first book, High Crimes and Misdemeanors, written and published. And she said every time she needs inspiration, she just goes to FGFbooks.com, looks up one of the columns, and reads it. But Clinton wasn't the only subject of Joe's writing. And I want to say typewriter. He used to use a typewriter in the old days, and he used to be able to type a column on a manual typewriter with no errors. I was baffled about that. But I have another collection that came out a year ago, Subtracting Christianity, Essays on American Culture and Society. It's an odd name, I know, Subtracting Christianity, but basically the title comes from one of the essays in the book, which describes how the society has turned its back on Christ and his teachings. In other words, the world would prefer to subtract Christ from us. So our goal at the Fitzgerald Griffin Foundation is to publish pretty much everything that Mr. Sobran wrote over his nearly 40-year career. And he wrote so many places that we really don't even have everything, but we have a lot. As his publisher for the last 15 years of his life, I saw the effect of his writing on myself and others. Many credit his writing to the return to their normalcy, their sanity, their reason. And others actually have told me that reading him, they've resumed the practice of their faith or started practice of their faith. And because was very moving, very touching. He would get in, like good music, he could get right into your soul with his writing. But Hustler, The Clinton Legacy, isn't a book dwelling on everything wrong with the Clintons. It certainly does describe the hypocrisy, the lies, and the outrageous behavior of the pair. But it's really a book of deep insights, perceptions, and thoughts about the character of our leaders, the direction of our country. And it's my hope that the world will soon rediscover the magnificent writing of Mr. Joseph Sobran. The world would be a better place if many more people would be able to read the tremendous body of his work. Thank you.